Views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
They wanted to hide it.
Tonight on Politics Now, accusations fly and put an execution on hold. The Dirty Antics, a pharmaceutical company, is accusing Nevada of pulling to acquire their drug.
I want the opportunity to meet with him and ask him questions myself.
Plus, the fight over Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh begins. Nevada's senators weigh in on his confirmation, and our face-off panel takes on the future of Roe versus Wade.
And goodbye to Las Vegas and hello to Charlotte, the reason our city lost its bid for the 2020 Republican convention. Well, it looks like the push for Las Vegas to host the 2020 Republican National Convention is over. It appears Charlotte is instead going to be hosting the event. Thank you for joining us. I'm Patrick Walker.
And I'm Steve Sebelius. The North Carolina city won the bidding war for the event that's expected to renominate Donald Trump for a second term. Donald Trump won North Carolina in 2016, but lost Nevada to Hillary Clinton. Las Vegas has never hosted a convention, but back in 2015, the city did submit a bid. But Las Vegas had to drop out that year, in part because the Republican National Committee wanted the convention venue to be empty for as long as 6 weeks before the big event. That's one reason the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority declined to make a formal bid this time around. In a letter sent in February, the LVCVA told the Republican National Committee that, quote, our destination does not have the space or dates available, unquote. But that didn't stop Nevada Republican Party Chairman Michael McDonald. He pitched the city in April at an RNC meeting in Florida, and in May he escorted the head of the RNC's site selection committee on a tour around the city, including a stop right here at 8 News Now. McDonald's pitch included Las Vegas's abundant hotel rooms and long experience with handling big conventions. The locations were winnowed down to Las Vegas and Charlotte after several other cities took a pass. But some of the members of the majority Democrat Charlotte City Council objected to hosting the RNC convention, citing the cost and the potential for disruption from protests. The final decision on a convention location is expected next week at the RNC summer meeting in Austin. McDonald said anything could still happen at that meeting.
All right, so with that in mind, does Michael McDonald still have his sights set on 2024?
Yeah, 2024 and then 2020. No, he's going to start lobbying, he said, for the 2024 convention if we lose this convention. He said that many of the RNC members were excited about Las Vegas. They wanted to come here. And that's a change from 2015 when there's a lot of social conservatives are kind of objecting to having their convention in a place they call Sin City. But now, I mean, the head of the Republican Party is a guy named Donald Trump. He used to own casinos. He's got a building right here in town with his name all over it. So it's a kind of a different Republican Party than it was back then.
Well, gubernatorial candidate Adam Laxalt has distanced himself from a rural Nevada sheriff accused of sexual harassment and assault. Storey County Sheriff Gerald Antinoro had endorsed Laxalt, the Republican nominee for governor, but Laxalt had declined to discuss the case while his office was investigating the charges.
Democrats have been hammering Laxalt for weeks over the Antinoro endorsement. Their message, Laxalt should immediately have rejected the endorsement of a sheriff accused of everything from harassing workplace environment all the way up to sexual assault. The sheriff denied the charges and was even reelected to a third term despite them. During 8 News Now's Republican candidate forum in late May, Laxalt said he couldn't say anything about the case.
I'm not going to do or say anything until that investigation is complete. And I think if I were to come out and unendorse or endorse at this stage of the game, it would either predict or prejudge the investigation.
Now, that investigation wrapped up last week. Laxalt's office said in a letter that it had reviewed hundreds of pages of documents and talked to 4 potential witnesses, some of whom denied anything inappropriate had ever occurred. A 5th witness, who was allegedly assaulted during a business trip in California, could not be located by the Attorney General's office, the letter said. An attorney who had asked for the investigation in the first place called the results, quote, far from complete, comprehensive, or balanced, unquote. But Laxalt's campaign took the opportunity this week to say he didn't want to be associated with the sheriff, whether the charges were proven or not. In a statement released by his campaign, Laxalt said, quote, now that the Attorney General's office has concluded its investigation, the campaign can comment on the Storey County Sheriff. Adam will not be campaigning with Sheriff Antinoro, and he will not recognize or use his endorsement in any way. Sheriff Antinoro is a Nevada law enforcement officer and therefore must be held to a higher standard, unquote.
And a former deputy to Laxalt, Wes Dunks, Wes Duncan, who was the Republican nominee for Attorney General, has also distanced himself from Antinoro's backing, removing the reference to the sheriff's endorsement completely from his campaign website. But this is an issue that's not going to be going away for them, right? Yeah, no, I don't think so. The Democrats are probably going to keep using the issue, hinting that the AG's office didn't really do a thorough and fair investigation and trying to link these two people for probably the rest of the campaign. Well, Judge Brett Kavanaugh, who is the president's choice for the next Supreme Court nominee, is making his rounds on Capitol Hill. Nevada's Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto says she wants to do research on his decisions and fully vet him, but has some concerns going in.
Going into this, do I have some initial concerns? Yeah, I have concerns that he came off a list that was put together by, the Federalist Society and Heritage Foundation, and they've been very vocal about this list because they know they put together some really conservative judges who would overturn Roe versus Wade, who would roll back fights that we have had over the years to protect against discrimination for LGBTQ, who are willing to move forward and really support corporate America over working families.
Republican Senator Dean Heller said in part, quote, Judge Kavanaugh has a record of adherence to the Constitution and has demonstrated a commitment to interpreting the law, not making it. I expect the U.S. Senate to conduct a fair, thorough confirmation process, and I look forward to meeting with the nominee, unquote. Heller was at the announcement of the Kavanaugh pick at the White House. Republicans want to get that confirmation vote done before the November election, so really how soon could we see those confirmation hearings? Well, I asked our Washington, D.C. correspondent, Alexandra Limon. Let's talk a little bit about the Supreme Court nomination process. So Republicans want to try to get this through. Obviously, there are questions about what could happen with the Senate coming up in the election, so I would assume this is a pretty expedited timeline for them.
That's right. Republican leadership has a pretty straightforward timeline. They've said that they want to have a confirmation hearing by mid to late August, and they'd like the Senate to vote on Judge Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court by September. And President Trump says he wants Judge Kavanaugh to be confirmed and on the bench by October, which of course is the beginning of the next Supreme Court term. And of course, like you mentioned, it's also before the midterm elections.
Well, clearly Democrats have not been happy. That has been no secret. There hasn't been a lot, at least on the surface, that we've been able to really determine that they could do. But what has kind of been the strategy in what you've heard?
Well, right. They hate this timeline, and their reason is, look, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell held up Merrick Garland's nomination, wouldn't even hold hearings because he said it was right before the election. They're saying we should do the same thing now. We should wait. But the reality is they don't have the votes to make that happen. So their strategy now is that they're saying they want to comb through Judge Kavanaugh's extensive paper trail. They're saying they want every email, every piece of paper of his 5 years in the Bush White House, and they also want to review all of the opinions. He's written some 300 opinions or so that he's written over the past 12 years for the D.C. Appellate Court. So at minimum, they're hoping to slow down the Republican timeline. At best, I mean, honestly, they're hoping to find some dirt, anything compelling enough to perhaps stop Judge Kavanaugh's nomination.
Well, people have accused Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell of hypocrisy because he's moving so fast now when he ignored a nominee that was put forward by former President Barack Obama. So, Steve, your opinion, is there anything to that?
In part. In one respect, though, no, because what McConnell said last time was that we shouldn't confirm a justice in the final year of a president's term. Right. And so we are now midterm. It's not the same situation. But that ignores, I think, what's the larger point. There's no law, there's no rule, there's no custom that has ever been in President of the United States that said we will ignore a presidential nomination at any point during any term. So I think what McConnell did then was absolutely unprecedented.
Well, Nevada's first execution in 12 years was put on hold after a drug company sued the state. Scott Dozier has been asked to be executed and is a twice convicted murderer, but lawyers for the drug company Alvogen say that they don't want the state to use their sedative in the execution and that Nevada obtained it without their permission.
This is a sedative that has an FDA approval for a specific purpose, and this is not one of those purposes. They just plan on misusing it.
So they want to characterize this and they want to conjure up between independent facts, some grand scheme, some conspiracy, some subterfuge. of the Nevada Department of Corrections snuck around some controls, dipped and dodged and did this in the dark of night in some smoke-filled room or something.
The state can still file an appeal with the state Supreme Court, but for now the execution is on hold for the second time until this lawsuit from the drug company plays out in court.
Well, Clark County is holding a special election in the Republican primary for county public administrator because election workers mistakenly allowed a number of people to vote twice. Those double votes could have impacted the outcome of the public administrator race, which was decided by just 4 votes. Now, voters received ballots in the mail, but now the county says they're seeing another problem. More than 1,400 people did not sign the ballot they submitted. In order to be counted, the ballots must be signed by the voter on the back of the envelope provided by the election department. Now, we have instructions on Las Vegas Now on how to check if your ballot was signed or not and how to fix it if you didn't. You have until July 17th to do that.
Yeah, if you voted in that, you might want to go check those instructions out. Very important, right? To
Absolutely, or your vote won't count again.
Duty. Well, more Homeland Security money coming to Las Vegas.
One of the issues is that the Las Vegas Strip is viewed as one asset.
Well, how the Chamber of Commerce is working to do just that, to secure the money for our city during their lobbying trip to D.C.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
Well, the Las Vegas Metro Chamber of Commerce is making its annual lobbying trip to Washington, D.C. next week.
I spoke with the Chamber's Vice President of Government Affairs, Paul Muradkin, about what's going to be on the agenda. What are some of the biggies that you're looking to tackle as you're talking with lawmakers?
Absolutely. For us, as always, we'll be talking about Yucca Mountain. As you know, the Chamber has been opposed to Yucca Mountain for almost 30 years. We've seen some House legislation move this past early May and early summer. Chambers are still opposing those efforts, so that'll be a big talking point for us as we see more folks wanting to transport Yucca Mountain materials to the site. We'll be opposed to that, and we're going to actually be talking to more delegation members outside of Nevada about why Yucca Mountain is not just a Nevada problem, but is a national security and transportation problem.
And that's a big deal, especially timely now. We're seeing a contingent of folks on that subcommittee coming out here to tour Yucca Mountain this upcoming weekend, right, as of the time the show airs. So this is a very timely issue.
It is, absolutely. And obviously it passed the House. H.R. 3053 did back in May. The Senate said they're not going to take any action. Dean Heller said the bill's dead on arrival, but it's something that we're keeping on top of and vigilant in our conversations with delegation members and outside of our state too.
A systemic approach to releasing public land. Public land is a controversial issue here in Nevada. So how does the Chamber look at that, and kind of what is that approach that you would like to see?
Sure. No, that's a great question. Obviously, with Nevada having about 87% of the land held by the BLM and the federal government, it's an important issue for all of us. And the Chamber is working with with Clark County, our city friends at the City of Las Vegas, Henderson, North Las Vegas. Clark County recently passed a resolution, so we'll be having those conversations and panel briefings on public lands and meeting with Chairman Bishop from Utah, who handles public lands in the House.
And the chamber's not advocating for a wholesale release of vast tracts of land, 30 or 40%. It's nothing like that. You're talking about select areas, correct, that would spur economic development?
Absolutely. So a systematic approach that allows growth and keeps us driving that issue in our community. Because obviously public land is a huge issue for residential and commercial development in our city.
Las Vegas has really been pushing to try to get increased funding now, Homeland Security funding. This has been a battle even before 1 October. We're seeing some increased money now after that has happened, but where does the chamber want to see this go? How does the funding need to change for Nevada and for Southern Nevada specifically?
Well, we absolutely think more money is absolutely appropriate, especially after what unfortunately happened October 1. Senator Heller was able to get some changes this year in the formula, but there's still a lot of things that need to be changed in the formula. One of the issues is that the Las Vegas Strip is viewed as one asset. They don't take into account that every single property is, in our opinion, a different asset and a target. So that's part of the formula we need to continue to try to advocate for change.
And that could be to the tune of millions of dollars in additional funding.
Easily. So it would definitely benefit our entire community.
Well, the Chamber is also hosting an event to try to get more funding for the Interstate 11 project as well, which is already phase 1 just about complete. Well, debating Trump's Supreme Court pick.
For everything I understand, he's a strict constitutionalist.
An all-hands-on-deck moment for those of us on the left side.
Our face-off panel weighs in on the pick and debates if the High Court will go after Roe versus Wade.
Plus, one of Nevada's top races is attracting lots of money. The latest fundraising in the race for U.S. Senate. That's next as Politics Now continues.
You're watching Politics Now.
Well, earlier in the show, we talked about D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals Judge Brett Kavanaugh. That's President Trump's nominee for the U.S. Supreme Court. We asked our face-off panel to discuss his nomination and the future of the historic Roe versus Wade decision. Here's KXNT radio host Alan Stock and Battleborn Progress Technical Director Mike Willoughby.
Well, we now know who the pick to be the next Supreme Court justice is, Judge Kavanaugh. Alan, what do you think of the pick?
Great pick. I mean, he's been praised by a lot of people from both sides of the aisle. I understand, there was already preordained protests set up against him. They already had picket signs already, manufactured ahead of time, so they were all ready for it. Some folks on the far left. Listen, give the guy a fair hearing and see what he has to say. From everything I understand, he's a strict constitutionalist, and he's for free speech, First Amendment for all sides of the aisle. So I don't know who's going to be able to find fault with him at all. And he's already said that he will abide by the law that's already been established. So when people said, "Oh my God, R.V. Wade," I mean, he's already indicated a couple of times in interviews in the last 10 years that he would have no intention of overturning R.V. Wade. So, I mean, that's not an issue. Give the guy a fair hearing like we gave Elena Kagan back in 2010.
Mike, what did you think of the choice as it came out, kind of on your side? What was the thinking?
It was a surprisingly safe choice, I will say that. I thought that there were certainly choices that were a little more bold on his short list that he could have made. That being said, I do think that there are some problematic things with his record. I think he's got a fairly problematic view of the convergence of technology and society. He's doing things like citing beeper cases from 1983 when we're talking about GPS records on cell phones in 2018. So that's unfortunately a little dated. I think we're going to see how things shake out, right? It is, as I've said before, an all-hands-on-deck moment for those of us on the left side. And we're going to fight it out, right? And that will absolutely, I'm sure, go all the way through him getting his up or down.
I think R.V. Wade has been something that's been brought up a lot in the conversation by both sides, whether or not that would be something that could potentially be under attack. Alan seems to say that, well, he would honor existing law. Do you believe that?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Not one tiny little bit. Again, there's a reason why it's an all-hands-on-deck moment. Again, I think it's been a priority for so long. Certainly, the vast majority of the rhetoric my entire life has revolved around overturning this law. I
personally would like to see R.V. Wade overturned. Personally, I mean, I very much would. I'm pro-life, and I make no bones about that. But having said that, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. He has said, actually, in interviews over the last 10 years, that specifically he would observe the law that's already been implemented and recognized and established. And he specifically, about R.V. Wade, said he would not overturn that particular law.
You can also watch the panel debate the delayed Scott Dozier execution, how the Senate race is going, and Las Vegas missing out on the Republican convention in 2020. Go to LasVegasNow.com and look for political news under the News tab. Patrick?
All right, Steve, this is the Race Now, where we tell you about some of the other big news in the 2018 election. The ballot initiative that would up the state's renewable energy portfolio will officially be known as Question 6. It calls for 50% of the state's energy to come from renewable resources by 2030. Right now, that number is about 21%. We talked about it a lot in last week's show. You can catch that on our website, LasVegasNow.com. Campaign fundraising totals are out for the second quarter, and Congressional District 3 Democrat Susie Lee says she has raised $850,000. Her campaign has $1.2 million on hand. Her opponent, Republican Danny Tarkanian, has not yet filed his second quarter numbers, but he had about $700,000 on hand at the end of the first quarter. And over on the Senate side, Jackie Rosen outraised Dean Heller for the fourth straight quarter. The incumbent Republican raised nearly $2.4 million and has $5.8 million in his campaign coffers. His challenger, Jackie Rosen, raising $3.5 million in the second quarter. She has $3.8 million in reserves. However, of course, all of this amount of money that they've raised and spent will be dwarfed by the money that's spent by outside groups on this race. Well, the school district budget is in, and I'll break down the results for you coming up next on Politics Now.
Call Ed. EdBernstein.com.
You're watching Politics Now.
Well, the Clark County School District put the wraps on its 2017-2018 school year budget. Its ending fund balance came out at a razor-thin $10.2 million out of a $2.4 billion budget.
CCSD has a policy that 2% of its unrestricted funds are supposed to be held in reserve through the end of the fiscal year, functioning like a rainy day fund. Over the last several years, the school board has waived that policy as the district has had to deal with budget cuts. The district's chief financial officer says salaries were about $15 million over budget due to teacher raises, but CCSD saw savings in services, supplies, and property, including holding off on purchasing some new school buses.
We had about $30 million of buses that we anticipated buying, and if they don't come in before June, we don't actually spend the money, and that becomes restricted funds for the following year because they can only be used for buses.
Trustees announced they'll be receiving quarterly updates about the budget as well as a more detailed breakdown of how the money is being spent.
All right, this is What to Watch, where we tell you about what we are keeping an eye on next week. Former Las Vegas City Councilor Ricky Barlow is being sentenced on Friday for wire fraud. Barlow admitted to a scheme where he hired people he knew so he could accept kickbacks to the tune of $49,000 and also pocketing campaign contributions. I'll be there covering that in federal court, and we'll also have a report by Vanessa Murphy from the I-Team on that as well, so you'll see that in next week's show.
Yep, that's going to be interesting to see what sentence he gets for those crimes. Well, that's our show. Thanks for watching Politics Now. You can email me at sibelius@lasvegasnow.com.
My email is pwalker@lasvegasnow.com. Stay up to date online. We'll see you back here next Saturday.